Welcome, everyone, to our second BLT podcast, Board Talk with Lisanne and Tracy. I'm Lisanne Godin, and this is my partner,
Tracy Alabisky.
We want to, first of all, thank everybody for their comments and feedback after our first podcast. Please remember to forward our podcasts out if you have friends or your social media contacts, family, anything like that. Anything you can do to help us get the podcast out to as many people as possible, we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, and just to interject.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, we were I don't know if you were surprised, but I was surprised by the amount of questions we got, comments, a lot more. I was expecting a viewership of 9, which we surpassed. So we've already exceeded our goals. So we continue with that. But yeah, get it out there as much as you can. That'd be great.
So our goal with this podcast is to get the correct information out to workers and employers in Ontario about WSIB so that it's easier for them to understand and navigate through a system in the unfortunate event of an accident or illness related to work. In our first podcast, we indicated that we'd be covering a few topics today, one of them being intent to object forms. So that's what we're going to talk about, the appeal process, the beginning of that appeal process. And we also plan to answer a question or two that we received from our first one. Unfortunately, the questions were not related to the information that we spoke of, but they are very much related to someone's experience with WSIB. Go ahead, Tracy.
So our first topic around the ITO, I think when I started, I thought it was going to be 5 minutes. But once we started putting it together, there was a lot more in there than you kind of think, or remember. There's more to add. Anyway, I want to start off with the intent to object. Obviously, you get a decision that you disagree with or you're not sure you disagree with. I want to start with the number one rule. Assume you can object to or appeal any decision made. Now, is that the truth?
No.
No, you can't object to every single thing, but I can tell you most of you don't know what is not appealable, so just make the assumption you can appeal anything you've got. Like, you got to start there, and then the board will let you know, the WSIB will let you know if something's not appealable. The basic rule is if it's an administrative decision, you can't appeal that. Mm-hmm. But most people don't usually. There's so many fine lines as to what's appealable. Back, there was many times we'd get files sent to us from operations when I was in appeals, and we'd have to tell operations, this is not appealable, and send it back. So not everyone at the board even knows what's appealable. So we start with that.
There's a process though, right?
Yes.
And that's what you're going to talk about today. So you can't just call the WSIB and say, I object.
No.
And, have your case moved on to the appeals branch.
Right.
So Tracy's going to talk to you about the process and the name of the form, which we call ITO. Okay,
yes.
So everyone talks about an ITO, but it's really an intent to object form.
That starts everything.
Yeah.
The one thing you'll need to know also is there is timelines around that intent to object form. That's what's so important about that. It's generally 6 months to appeal a decision, unless it's a return to work issue. If it's return to work, then you have 30 days. The other issue that no one really probably knows is it's actually 30 days to object to a reemployment decision.
Right.
If you've been terminated within 30 days, within the first 6 months of your work injury. If you happen to get let go, you need to appeal that within 30 days. And again, almost no one knows that. Mm-hmm. Before I get into that intent to object form and completing it and some of those details, the other thing I just want to mention is Section 120 of the Act talks about the 6 months to appeal a decision. That's your time limit. But the other section that it gets confused with a lot of times is Section 22. And that's where you have 6 months to claim an injury. And we spoke about that last week.
Yeah.
We went through, you have 6 weeks to put your claim in if you're claiming a work-related injury. But sometimes it gets confusing around, the sections of the act and which 6 months we're talking about, especially if you miss the 6 months to appeal or to put a claim in, and then you want to appeal that decision, you have 6 months from that. But not to get too deep into that. And the next piece I want to talk about is Section 121. Section 121 for everybody is just so the WSIB has the right to review any decision as many times as they want. They'll call it a reconsideration. They can reconsider that decision anytime. We'll get into how that affects the time limits in the ITO. So around the intent to object form, where it's right online. So when you get a decision, that ITO is right online. The first thing I want to mention is in all your decision letters, there needs to be an objection paragraph, meaning, they've made a decision, and at the end of the letter, they're going to tell you that you can appeal this decision, or I think they use the word object, you can object to this decision, and they'll give you the timeline right in there. They'll say, what are we in now, April? So whatever it is, it's November 7th. You have to appeal or object to this by November 7th.
Yeah.
Now, where do we find that ITO?
So you go to www.wsib.on.ca, and there's a little looking glass there. You put in ITO, and you will get your PDF version of the form. It's 3 pages, and it's fillable online.
Right. Most important thing I'd say on that ITO, they're going to ask you to list the decision date. So you need to write off the letter and the issue specific that you are appealing. We used to get a lot of letters or the ITO. It wouldn't have any dates, nothing. It simply says, I object to every single decision the WSIB ever made. And that doesn't count for anything, unfortunately,
So I think an important thing as well is to say that a verbal decision is not a decision. So if a case manager says to you, no, I'm unable to allow this because of XYZ, they're giving you their rationale, but your decision is actually the written component of what they just said to you on the phone, and the decision date is the date on that letter. So we've had some situations, right, when we were both working there, where maybe a case manager forgot to send the letter.
Oh, yeah.
And that meant that by the time when they did finally issue the letter, then the 6 months to object went from that decision date, not from when it was actually done.
And even on that point, if it is, if they don't do, that's when they don't do the letter at all. We'd find the memo on there, we'd see the telephone conversation. But the second thing would be they do your letter and they don't have the date in. They may put the objection paragraph, but no date, or that whole last piece is missing. It's not a default that it's 6 months from there. They have to list it. The board must inform you of the objection, your right to appeal, and they have to inform you of the actual date that you have up until. So that's important to know too, because I think sometimes people, I missed it. We have the date of the decision, but I didn't appeal. But there is no objection paragraph there, so it opens it wide open. Before we get into that full process, the other thing I was just going to talk about, I'm going back to the reconsiderations again, where the board can reconsider all their decisions. There's been some confusion. I think it's always been there. It's not something new. It's always been there with some case managers where someone misses the time limit to appeal, but they'll send in new evidence. Maybe they got a new medical report. You send something new. It could be an employer sending in surveillance or something they've come up with, or they found something. You send new information in, and then the board will tell you, or the case manager will tell you, sorry, you missed the time limit to appeal.
Right.
Well, you may have missed the time limit to appeal, but you can still they have to reconsider the new information provided and provide, their written decision on that. Now, what's interesting is if they review it and they uphold it and they just say, no, it's still denied, I looked at the new medical or whatever, the original decision date stays. How often, is there a maximum time you're allowed to appeal or to have a reconsideration? No, there is no. It could be 60 times. You have to be
reasonable, but
you can't abuse the process, right?
It can be 60 times.
Well, I'm just saying. You just can't abuse it, right? The board is going to put their foot down at some point and say, no, this is abuse of the process.
Yeah.
So you're right. But yeah, it could be 2-3 times. You get a medical report and they give you a reason. You get another one, maybe a witness statement, and then you send that in. But just because you missed the time limit doesn't mean the board doesn't have to do the reconsideration. The downside of it, once you miss that appeal, is if they still deny it, you cannot move forward to the appeals process, to the appeals branch or services division.
Because you missed that time limit.
Because you missed the time limit. So that's the key there with those reconsiderations.
Funny story on that. When I was working in one of the sectors at WSIB, we had a newer employee, and he kept putting in a new objection paragraph in each one of his reconsideration letters. So, of course, people were like, okay, now I'm at the time limit because you've given me a date here and you've given me an objection paragraph. And we couldn't figure out why this guy, why there was just so much work coming through. And so we started to go through his stuff, and then one of his peers said, dude, stop putting objection paragraphs in there. They didn't meet the time limit, right? But so it was, that was just a funny little
bit of a make work.
Yeah, he was working full out on these recons.
So let's talk about the appeal process overall, what that looks like. So first of all, you will get a decision from the WSIB or case manager with that objection paragraph that we talked about and a date, if it's 6 months or 30 days. Again, if it's missing, then there is no time limit. There's no default to the accident date. If they don't list that objection paragraph, there's no time limit. You've got forever. You would then need to submit the ITO. So you've got this letter, you need to let the WSIB know, I'm not happy with that. I'm going to want to object to that. So you need the intent to object form. Lisanne's mentioned where you can find that on the website.
Right.
We'll post it right here again. That's where it is. You go right here. The WSIB, when they get your intent to object form, you have an option of providing additional evidence or just send in the form. It doesn't matter. If you have additional evidence, for sure send it in.
Right.
What the WSIB is going to do is they're going to look at that and they say, there's new info. We're going to do a reconsideration and see what we have. If they sometimes they allow the decision because there's something new. So that starts the new, a new decision, a new time limit, and that's great. You get what you want. And if they don't, and they uphold it or the denial stays, what happens is they will let you know, they send a letter, but they send the file to an area called access. So they're going to send out a copy of the claim file. Those new claims are pretty small, but some people are pretty surprised how big these files get. In the old days, it was boxes, but you'll get a copy of the file. And with that, you'll get what's called an appeal readiness form. And we'll put the name here, the appeal readiness form. We call it the ARF. I think everyone in the business calls it the ARF. Case managers, representatives, OEA, OWA, we all call it the ARF. That ARF is called the appeal readiness form. And basically, you got all the time in the world. There is no time limit. And once you have the ITO in, to take a look at all that evidence, maybe go get a new medical report, maybe get a new witness, whatever is missing that could help with the file, you get that. It could be surveillance for employers, that type of stuff. But once you're ready, you complete the appeal readiness form. The importance of that appeal readiness form is when they say ready, they mean ready. Because when you send that in, it's going to go to appeals. It does get reviewed again for a reconsideration by the case manager. So especially if you put new information, it's going to get reviewed and be a whole new thing. We were talking earlier, there's no Columbo effect. When I was in appeals years ago, at the start of it, you were allowed to do that. They would bring new evidence at the last minute. And as an appeals officer, it could be in a hearing. I'd get, what? And then we have to take a half hour, review it, and then continue the hearing. So that doesn't happen. When you complete that form, if it's a hearing in writing, they are going to take that and they are going to move it to, making a decision. So the good thing is there's no rush to the appeal readiness form. When you're ready, you put it together, you do your submission letter, your letter that outlines all the reasons, and then it goes.
So just to be clear, the intent to object form comes in what that does, even if you're thinking, maybe I want to object to this, I'm not sure, I got to talk to people, whatever, you get your form in if you think you might want to, because it preserves your time limit. You've met the time limit if you get that intent to object form in 6 months. Sometimes people hold off because it's like, oh, I don't know, whether it's the worker or the employer, they hold off and then they end up missing their time limit. So that just preserves your time limit. Once you get that in, you can send in that ARF years down the track.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. So whether you're the worker or the employer, you can send stuff in much later.
There's many topics where you really have no idea if, for most workers or employers, you really have no idea if you should object or not. Like, we have to come up with 4 examples. Like, I'd say a Nell Award. So if you got 11% for a right wrist, like, is that good? Did they miss the mark? Like, those are tough. Like, the Nell ones are tough. MMR date.
Yeah.
How do you know, like, maximum medical recovery? Is that a good date? Should we agree to that? Could even be other things. Accident date. The date they pick is the date of your accident.
Well, that's huge.
It's huge. It can have these really big effects. So some of these issues, you don't even know if you should appeal it.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I don't know. And
well,
send in the ITO. And employers even more. Lisanne's going to talk a little more about the employers in a bit. But again, like, they don't know. They don't even have the file usually. The employer has no idea if they should appeal or, there's just been initial, some entitlement granted. What do we do?
Yeah, exactly. So regarding employers who send in an ITO, just want everyone to understand what happens in that case. So if an employer sends in an ITO to a decision made in one of their injured workers' cases, so case manager gives entitlement to this part of the body or anything like that, they send in their ITO and a letter automatically goes to the injured worker or injured party to let them know your employer has submitted an intent to object. Here's a copy of your file, and we want you to review the medical information in your file and let us know if there's any redactions. So the worker always has the ability to redact personal information out of that. So sometimes you've got someone with a low back condition, but then some of the medical speaks to non-compensable cancer, and they don't want that diagnosis to go out to their employer, so they take it out of there. What that causes, though, just so that you all know, it often causes a worker to take that intent to object very personally. So they often look at it as, what does the employer not believe that this happened at work, and are they doubting the legitimacy of my injury, that kind of thing. So it's hard, and I'm talking to all the workers out there, it's hard not to take it personally, but please consider that the majority of time, the employer just wants to get access to your file. And they want to be able to read the medical information themselves, see if there's anything that they could do to reduce the duration of the claim by offering modified work. So remember, they're operating a business, right?
Yeah.
You're not able to work. They are losing money. I know it sounds strange to say, or it's not a touchy-feely way to say it, but there is a loss of productivity, and they are probably spinning, saying, like, how long is this for? Should I replace the person? Should I get a temp person? How long are they going to be away? What could I offer them so that I could get them to be productive?
Especially if they have a representative as a paralegal or a lawyer.
Yep.
The paralegal and the lawyer have an obligation, a legal obligation, to make sure they act in the best interest of the employer, just as we do for workers or whatever. So one of the things, we want to do is make sure, you cover your butt, and you get the intent to object in.
Right.
Because the last thing you want is to find out you missed a time limit on something you should have appealed.
Right.
I would not want to be that paralegal ever. So,
Yeah.
The first rule of thumb for paralegals and lawyers with WSIB stuff is you send that intent to object form,
Right.
and you figure out later. And I can tell you from being in appeals now, I don't remember the numbers exactly, but I'm going to tell you it's something like 1,000 ITOs to 10 ARFs.
Yeah.
Like there is a lot that come in that do not end up going through the appeals process. Right. And that's just shows you, like, the majority, it's all on track. It just helps, employers follow the file.
Time limit.
And
That's it.
It's a legal obligation.
Yeah.
But it's hard not to take it personally. Like,
No,
why are
it
they
really
appealing
is.
and
Yes.
the stress it causes? We know.
Especially with mental stress injuries.
Yeah.
It's hard not to take it personally
for
because
sure.
then it just adds more stress. And so, that said, if you're an employer and you're submitting an ITO just to preserve a time limit, like you really don't have an issue with the entitlement in the case, you don't have to do this, but it might be a good idea to let the worker know, I'm submitting an ITO and it's just for that.
Mm-hmm. Especially
right?
if you're in touch with the worker regularly.
Yeah.
A lot of
let them
employers
know.
keep in touch, and maybe they're working on return to work stuff. Let them know we sent an ITO. I don't want you to take offense.
Yeah, exactly. So, this isn't a requirement, but it's a good labor relations thing.
Labor relations. Yeah.
It really helps keep that relationship positive, and it prevents extended duration that could happen if you start to have a worker that gets positional and they're going to show you how disabled they are, right? And like that they can't return to work. Right? So
the relationship deteriorates
it
drastically.
Could. Right, exactly. So just remember, for return to work issues, you have 1 month.
Yep.
Okay, and it's up here, 1 month from the date of the decision.
Yep.
And for case management, you have 6 months from the date of decision.
Yep.
If you happen to have one of those rare reemployment cases,
so rare.
you're back down to the 1 month to object to the decision.
Yep. And again, we'll put the process kind of down here, but you need to submit that ITO on time. Number 2, you're going to get access to the file. It preserves your ability to object whenever you're ready, so there's no deadline to that. And you know what? If there are organizations out there that can help when you're not sure, that are free. The OWA, or Office of the Worker Advisor, the OEA, Office of the Employer Advisor.
Right.
There may be unions, or there's lots of representatives out there like us that are available.
Well, like you.
Like me, like our team.
Yeah.
We have a full team. And again, it's asktheblt at gmail.com right here. And we're part of AMIC Professional Corp, and there's our website right there also. We'll stick that in there.
Excellent. So don't forget that email. Please email us any comments, suggestions for any future topics. So after our last one, we did get a question.
Yeah.
So
we got a few questions.
Yeah, we got a few questions, but one that we're going to attempt to answer here.
Yes. Yeah. What I did love is we did get some questions from ex-employees that had some questions for friends. It was just interesting,
Yeah.
But anyway, it was good. Some good feedback, a lot of good questions. Here's one for, hey, Tracy and Lizanne. Love that you two are doing this for injured workers and employers to learn about the WSIB system. I've been off work for 2 years after a serious MVA while I was working. So my doctor said I needed to return to work modified work on a very gradual hours, starting at 2 hours, twice per week. And my employer was able to accommodate me, which is great. So far, this is so good. Mm-hmm. For the hours I am not working, I have been using my sick time, so I continue to get full wages. Thankfully, I have a lot of it, but is this correct? I am concerned that I will run out before I am back to full hours, and then I will have to use vacation time.
Okay.
Thoughts?
Yeah. Well, after you so aptly pointed out in our first podcast that I took the easy way out and worked in return to work.
There is
in the beginning of my career, yes.
I stand by it.
Before claims. So what should be happening here is if you require modified work and modified hours to get back to work for your work-related injury. Okay, so it's very different if it's short-term disability and it's, that non-compensable cancer that we were talking about before. Okay, so if it's for your work-related injury, what should be happening is that you go in to work for your 10 hours a week and you normally work 40, your employer pays you your 10 hours a week at your regular pay, and WSIB pays the other 10 hours a week, and that's a WSIB benefit.
Right.
So at the end of the year, you're going to get your T4 from your employer for the hours worked, and you're going to get a T5 from WSIB for all hours that were covered under WSIB to support your return to work for the work-related injury. Okay?
Yep.
So it's unfortunate here that this gentleman we replied to him by email.
Yep.
So it's unfortunate that he's used up his vacation time, sick time.
Sick days.
What he's going to have to do is contact WSIB or talk to his employer and say, actually, you need to replenish my sick bank here because WSIB should be the one paying me.
Right. Now, thanks. That kind of explains everything there. Like, really, you should, if that's happening, you need to question that and maybe get a hold of someone if needed.
Yeah.
We had a lot of other comments and questions. One of the ones we'll comment on is, they want to know our thoughts on return to office. So when we went, I guess we were all working from home 2020. Mm-hmm. Did you like it? Did you like working from home, or what was your experience?
I loved it. So some people were like, I don't get to talk to my friends and I don't get to go for coffee. And I was like, I'm good. I'm getting my work done. It's all fine, right?
Yeah.
And you had a different experience, right?
Yeah. Well, I loved it at first. It was a pajama party for 6 months, right?
Yeah.
You just, it was a lot of fun and just something different, I think, just the nuance of it all. I was really good at getting up early and I still waking up at the same time. I'd do like a 5K and walk and get to work and felt great. But, that started no more getting up for the walk, and just... I just found it got really monotonous. I spoke to the same 9 people every single day, right? Yeah. It was just video with those things. You never, there was no going for coffee. And I think the downside was you never left your desk, you just sat there the whole day.
Yeah, but I saw the positives in that. So I didn't have like an hour GO train ride in and an hour GO train ride out.
Yeah.
So I was actually working. Those hours, and you're more productive. You're getting a lot more done. I mean, the walk to your coffee maker and filling up your coffee and coming back to the kitchen table, which is where I was working. It was great. So I think there's a lot of
pros and cons
for sure.
I think the older people.
Yeah.
Like,
if I was a new
home
employee,
is great. You got 30 friends you count on from work, and you know your stuff.
But a new person who started during COVID or like shortly after,
you're not meeting anyone.
You don't have those peers that you can just kind of look over to their desk and say, hey, what would you do with this one? Because there's never a case that's just straight perfect, right? There's always something wonky that you're like, I'm not sure if it fits into the policy. And it's great to have your peers. So when I was doing it, I'd already been there for 30 years, right? So, it's not, I wasn't looking too much.
And we had a big support group, right?
Yeah, we did. We had
even when we were
peers.
at home, because we used so many over the years. I think a lot of new people. But when
you're learning a new job, and you're in that first 5 years, let's say, you really need to bounce ideas off of people, and it's harder when you need to call them or get them on a Teams call, that type of thing.
Definitely. I will say I do feel sad if we. I still say we. I shouldn't,
me
because
too.
we're retired. But if they lose 200 Front Street, that's kind of sad. It was just I remember how much fun it was moving
in there from Two Bloor.
Yeah, we just show up and all our boxes were at our desk, and it was a brand new building, a brand new area.
Yeah.
It's such a great location with the GO train.
Yeah, it really was.
It was fantastic that way. So that'll be sad if that's gone.
Yeah.
Who knows what's going on with the building? But that would be the hardest part. But I mean, other than that, I don't know. It's not like it's our choice.
Yeah.
No one's listening to our 2 cents on that. But good luck.
Yeah. So even though we worked at the board before, we don't have an opinion as ex-directors on return to office, right? So it's not like we don't really, we're not entitled to an opinion, really.
And in the end, you loved it. Working from home, and I didn't like it, so we got a totally different 2 cents on that anyway.
Exactly.
That's why I still work in the office, and you work at home.
Most of the time. Exactly.
We will be putting out. Probably our podcast will start shorter topics, like shorter sessions, and then we'll be. Probably more often. We're still working that out. As you see, the set's changed a little bit already. We're just working those things out. But again, appreciate all your support, feedback, questions, comments.
I did want to let people know that some of the questions or future topic suggestions that we've got right now, loss of earnings lock-in.
Ooh.
So people want to talk about that or understand it. And another one which was very much related to the type of work that we do regularly, but is when there's an intersect of a work-related psychological injury and discipline in the workplace. So when it happens kind of close together, and how do you differentiate, what's affecting what?
Yeah. So and how it affects entitlement.
We will we'll definitely flesh that out and have a specific podcast on that topic.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
What you feel, just theory. What you see, just